Colleagues, it being 4 o'clock, I think for the first time in recollected history, we are going to start on time and end on time, whatever that may mean. To the members of the gallery and all, the City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for council, standing or advisory committee meetings, and information upon request. To make a request for any city service, please contact accessibility@london.ca or 519-661-2489, extension 2425. There will be a test to remember that extension later. The committee will recess as appropriate at 6:30, presuming we are beyond that. So I'll look for disclosures of any pecuniary interest. Councillor Morgan.
Yes, I have a pecuniary interest on item 3.3, section E, which is appointments to the London Hydro Board of Directors. One of the applicants actually plays a role in the review of my performance-based appraisal, which directly impacts my salary at my employer, Western University, so I won't be voting on that one.
Thank you. Any other disclosures? Seeing none. Under the consent agenda, we have the London Economic Development Corporation Purchases of Services Amending Agreement. I'll look for any comments or questions. Councillor Squire.
Just a quick question. It's about timing. I noticed that this agreement, the present agreement, expires at the end of the month, and it's coming to us sort of 4 days before that happens. The amending agreement, which is going to have some changes, I assume, when will it come to us? Because if it comes to us on 2 or 3 days before the expiry of the extension, it will sort of obligate us to do something rather than have a chance to sort of review it fully and make any suggestions that we might want to make. So I was just curious about the timing.
Mr. Hayward.
So through the chair, we're planning on having that to you on October 28th, and that'll give you 2 months to deal with it before the end of the year.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you very much. I'll need a motion to accept. Councillor Morgan, seconded by Deputy Mayor Helmer. Then you are not going to move it then. Question, please. Councillor Morgan.
Yeah, sorry, I was too busy declaring my conflict that I didn't get it. I got too excited about the meeting. So this is on the London Economic Development Corporation's Purchase of Service Amending Agreement, right? Okay, so I support the direction that our staff are moving on this and extending the agreement for a period of time to work out negotiating an agreement based on a number of parameters that our staff have identified. The one I'm particularly interested in is establishing really clear metrics and targets that would form the basis of the annual report to council, and I'd actually be interested in maybe reports to council more than annually, to be honest. So I wanted to make a few comments on what I think, because I know that, again, we'll have some time to work towards this. I know that there'll be some discussions so that our staff have a sense on where I'm sitting with a number of these items. For me, with the London Economic Development Corporation, I wouldn't say that I'm unsatisfied in the work they're doing. I think that they, from all intents and purposes, appear to be doing really great work in the community. Where I'm looking for more metrics and reporting is for me to understand the value proposition of the money that's being spent each and every year on the organization. I know that from my experience through corporate services and our land acquisitions from an industrial perspective, I am aware of the work that our staff do. I'm also aware of that LEDC plays an important role there. Where I see some gray areas in the division of that work and who is doing what. With our staff, I certainly know how they're held to account. They work for the corporation. With the LEDC, it's under our agreement with them. And so having really clear parameters on metrics and targets and deliverables will allow for me to really understand exactly the role that they're playing for us, the work that they're doing in the economic development space, what we expect them to do, and to know exactly how we can hold them to account. And I think that's important because, you know, this isn't a local board. It is a separate organization that we are contracting to do services with. From my understanding, I think we're the only client. I'm someone can correct me if I'm wrong. It certainly could be a local board, that would be a different legislative framework, but it's not. So the contract is actually a really important piece of that accountability mechanism, given that with a local board, we'd have a lot more influence and control on a regular basis over the organization. So again, I preface this with saying, I'm not unsatisfied with any of the work that they're doing. I'll be frank, from time to time, I'm not sure exactly what role the LEDC may have played in some of our work in economic development. And I'm also interested, very much interested in the discussion around the metrics, because that will really make it very clear for me the scope of the work that we want them to do, whether that's on employment, our job creation, or our land strategy. Understand that a lot better, get regular reporting on that, and I think will make me feel a lot more comfortable about the value proposition for what is a large annual expenditure in the economic development space. So I wanted to share those comments for our staff. I know the work is actually ahead, but that's kind of what I'm looking to discuss when it comes back.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? I'm looking twice and three times because I would have missed Councillor Lewis otherwise.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I will hold my hand higher next time so that it's easier for you to see. I will be brief because Councillor Morgan has summed it up very well, I think. I have to tell you, as a first-term councillor, I'm not sure exactly what the Economic Development Corporation does. And I think we need more clarity and transparency, and I think we need goals and targets. I think when we look at, frankly, the jobs situation in the city, where we are with people not participating in the workforce, and there are a variety of reasons for that. I'm not at all implying that it's the work of the LEDC that's contributing to that, but I think we have to really, as a council and as a city, have some direction on how we're going to tackle these problems and challenges. And I think clear metrics and clear goals for the LEDC is a key component of that. And if we don't know, I don't think that we're doing the community a service when we are talking about the poverty issues, the job challenges in this community. So I think we do need to have a new agreement and a new understanding of what specifically we are expecting of and asking the LEDC to deliver on. So I will sum it up and leave it at that. But thank you for Councillor Morgan for the excellent synopsis on what are very much my views as well.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. I might reference colleagues that if you want to get some detailed information, the website I think is fairly explicit. What you'll see in the recommendation here is that we would be making the recommendation to have the new agreement put in place as of December 31, 2019, and you'll read the details on page 4 there. But I would commend and recommend to colleagues to look at the website. As a member of the LEDC, frankly, the more I attend, the more I have the sense of it, and I think you get that kind of granular detail you're thinking about if you reference that as well. And we have colleagues here from LEDC, but I know they would be available for any discussion you want to have. But I take the thoughts and comments as a member of that board, but also in terms of what colleagues are saying. So any other comments or questions? Councillor Kayabaga.
Thank you. Through your chair, could we maybe staff could answer on the specific question what LEDC does, because it seems like some people don't have an idea of what they do. Maybe staff can kind of report on where it started and how it started and where we're at today.
Yeah, well, I'll ask Mr. Hayward to make a comment, but I think today, I don't think respectfully is a place for the history of it, but I would say that, again, that information is all available on the website. But Mr. Hayward, do you want to take a crack at that?
So through the chair, it's primarily covered in the purchase of service agreement. They act as the primary economic development body on behalf of the Corporation of the City of London. They will assist local businesses with expansions and with relocation within the City of London. They obviously are involved heavily in attracting new business as well. And they are involved in the labour side of it in terms of trying to work with the other connectors within the boundaries of the city to ensure that the labour force is being developed. And then the other elements are collaborate with us in terms of funding opportunities with the federal government. They will advocate very often on our behalf as well. So those are just some of the things that they do. But it's all covered in the current agreement, and that's exactly what we're trying to work out what it is they will be providing in the future and where we need them to be, as well as the metrics that go along with measuring that. So.
Any other comments or questions? Councillor Kayabага.
Thank you. Again, through your chair, I was wondering, because of, I had the opportunity to reach out to them and kind of get an idea of what exactly they do and where they're at right now and what they've been able to accomplish so far. And to me, it seemed very clear and it seemed like progress. I could be biased because I'm new and I don't have a history of what they've done longer in the past, but it seemed very clear to me. It seemed like there's been job attraction. I was also able to look at their KPMG report review that they had, and I read the part where it said that for the value that we put into this organization, we're getting way more as a city. That was in the review that was conducted by KPMG, and I did ask them if we were, as we've been doing this for different organizations and different boards, if we were to have them report more to the city, what kind of impact it would have on their organization, as they're a small size organization. There's not a lot of people who work there. I did hear from my colleague here mention that he wanted more than once a year, and that to me sounds like there's going to be a lot more reports to write, and a lot of time would be spent writing reports. I wonder if they have the capacity to do that, or to hire more people to do that. And at the same time, I'm in support of having them report, but I think for me, the concern from the conversation that I had with the organization is that would require a lot of work, specifically focused on writing reports rather than going after seeking more talent and more jobs in London. So I wonder if we can maybe try 1 year, see if that works, instead of wasting time and money, putting value somewhere and then spending all that time writing reports, and that would come back to council. Maybe we can also ask them if they see any value in reporting more than once a year, or if we could possibly, I agree, I do think everybody should be reporting back if we're funding it, but is it a good use of our money and time for them to report more than once a year?
Thank you, Councillor Kayabага. What I will do is I'll ask Mr. Hayward to take that under consideration as part of the deliberations as we work towards the agreement effective December 31, presuming that this passes. So thank you for that comment. Mr. Morgan, Councillor Morgan.
Yes, I just want to be clear. I'm not saying I don't know what the LEDC does. And in our staff report, they actually target metrics and targets that will form the basis of the LEDC's annual report to council. If you read the current agreement, there is a lack of very clear metrics and targets associated with that reporting. That means it's great. You can go on their website, you can read all sorts of information about what they're doing. But this is a $2.28 million contract from the City of London. We should be very clear in the establishment of our purchase of service agreement with the LEDC exactly what we want them to do and exactly what we want them to report on. I think that's our responsibility as council, and that's what I'm looking for us to discuss. That onus is on us, not the LEDC. That onus is on us in the way that we want to establish the purchase of service agreement, and I'm glad to see that our staff are targeting that as an area of focus in the development of a new agreement, because that is something that I would have seen as a deficiency in the existing agreement, that level of clarity. As for the frequency of reporting, there's many times we get reports from on a regular basis, particularly on this one. This one is different for me in that it is not a local board where we have a significant amount of control. The parameters under which we control the LEDC are under the purchase of service agreement. They are a separate organization, so the clarity we can provide in our purchase of service agreement and the level of reporting that we expect as a council is an item for discussion that I would like to discuss, and I certainly value my colleagues' differing opinions on how frequent they would like to see that. But for me, I wanted to just emphasize where my focus is, and that is kind of where staff is leading. I see value in that level of granularity in the purchase of service contract, because that is the only time that we get to really dictate anything.
Any other comments or questions with respect to LEDC? Then I'll look for a mover of the recommendation shown on page 4. I won't read it in detail, I know we have. Is there a mover? Councillor Cassidy, seconded by Councillor Hillier. Any other comments or questions? Then I'll turn your attention to the screen as we vote.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed, 15-0.
Thank you, and I do note that we have representatives from LEDC here. Thank you for attending. We appreciate it very much. Colleagues, I'll turn your attention now to item 3.1 of the scheduled items. We're going to hear a delegation as requested, and after we hear the delegation, we will look for a motion to approve this. But before we do that, I want to remind all delegations two things. You provided excellent information in advance. It's been read by councillors, as is our practice. It's 5 minutes, and the clerk reminds me when it's 4 minutes, 30 seconds, and I'll just let you know that. And then certainly we're open to any questions that I'm sure you'll be open to any questions that colleagues around the table have. So I think we have Mr. Brower, Chair, and Stephen Gustizia, President and CEO of the Housing Development Corporation. You are on.
Thank you. Members of council. Rather be watching the soccer game this afternoon than sitting down here.
5 minutes, you'll be there.
Okay. So let me repeat again. I'd rather be watching the soccer game than standing before you this afternoon. But I'm a committed member of the Housing Development Corporation, and I hope if somebody, if maybe you can delegate somebody to watch the game and tell us the score when it's going on. You won't. I've brought with me, Your Worship, members of council, an amazing and dedicated group of board members: Dan Ross, Vivian Iron, Louis Stevens, and Larry Hazel, who each have given their free time on this important organization and its affordable housing goals. I'm also here with our Steve Justicia, our CEO, and my delegated and capable staff. You have witnessed our staff work with housing group, developers, and with the city through your committees. And you have our report provided our business activities and audit statement from 2018. In respect of our time, I will focus our overview on challenges and opportunities that we need to address together. Council established HDC as a way to enable more affordable housing through the specialized work of our small office. We are an arm's length body that works with efficiency and trust, and with accountability to you and our community. 3 years ago, our first year, we showed you how your investment created great value, even when working with the same programs and funding. Last year, we talked about the need to create municipal tools for affordable housing. Since then, we have been working together on policies that provide a range of new affordable housing solutions. As a result, HDC is now sitting at the table as a resource providing input into the related city planning and development processes. And we keep raising the bar. Our HDC board sets high expectations of our staff. Our staff, in turn, do the same in their work with developers and partners. This work challenges them, our board, you, and your staff. But if we didn't do this, we didn't do our job. Even when we know you have many competing priorities. Today, I'm here with our third report to you. Unfortunately, we start by recognizing that the housing affordability situation in London is not getting better. Despite our work, we continue to experience the impact of rising house prices and a lack of affordable housing stock in our community. Without more affordable housing units, rents will keep rising, apartment vacancies will remain low, homelessness solutions will lack housing, and the specialized housing needs of aging and other unique groups will continue to grow. And most importantly, more people will not be able to afford living and working in this great city. As a former contractor, I often saw what happened when you put off needed building and repair. You call this deferred liability. But an aging pipe or sewer line will pale in comparison to the future cost of this housing crisis if we don't do more now. Paraphrasing John F. Kennedy, the future is an achievement based on what we do today. We know that you share these concerns and you are responding. Over the past few days, your committee has received reports on housing funding, policies and plans, and you have seen the AGC as an active partner in this work. But that's not all we do. On a daily basis, AGC staff will work behind the scenes with nonprofit housing organizations, LMCHs, builders, developers, and others to help navigate new housing programs, funding, and resources. This includes work with our friends at CMHC and the province. CMHC has been very supportive of HDC and our shared approach to advancing affordable housing together. Our staff are constantly looking for new opportunities to support projects through new means, like through surplus land. This work is important to create an inventory of affordable housing, while we are also help building strong and inclusive community.
30 seconds, sir.
I've personally heard from developers that working with AGC makes a real difference in projects like the one on Dundas Street and Hamilton Road. They are on your screen, and we support those projects from start to finish. Our board sees the difference we make, but we also hear that the process to create affordable housing remains too complex.
Thanks very much. What we are now going to do is entertain questions from councillors to our delegation. Are there any questions for our delegation? Councillor Hopkins.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much for the presentation. I'm just going to follow up with what you just said about affordable housing being very complex. I think it is very complex. I know as a councillor, I want to understand it more because I think it is a really important issue, not only to the City of London, but I think all municipalities are experiencing affordable housing and for all. No matter if you're young or old or rich or poor, affordable housing is becoming a concern. I want to, and I know HDC has been in existence for, I want to say 5, 6, maybe 7 years, or 3. There you go, thank you. And as more units come on board and trying to understand what exactly affordable housing is. We know housing has gone up. The stats in 2016, the average home was around almost 300,000. Stats in 2018 were almost 400,000. So I'm just trying to understand how affordable housing is and how we understand that as we move forward and more units come on board. Is there a mechanism in place, or is HDC looking at a registry and trying to understand exactly how many units we have, or is that important to understand the units and what's available in our city?
To the delegation.
Well, thank you. First of all, if it takes too long for the process, if it takes longer for the process to ask for an application than to build and to occupy it, there's a problem. Okay. Second of all, if you upfront expect development charges and parking dedication to be part of affordable housing, doesn't make sense. So the ball is in your court. You have to take a look and see how you really want to address affordable housing. Because for an apartment building to pay $500,000 to the city before they can start, hello, doesn't work. So I think those are, and if it, Mr. Helmer 2 weeks ago at the ground turning for the Dundas Street project. It took 3 years. Now, I'm not saying it was the city, I'm not saying it was but 3 years. How can things be affordable if it takes 3 years for the project to start? Doesn't make sense. So there got to be a better mechanism. I mean, you know, like we all can say, and I've heard all councillors say, yes, we're ready for affordable housing. Hello, I don't see anybody saying, well, you know, I mean, I remember one article I read in the paper, and the paper says, well, one councillor says, well, I wonder what, you know, what the province is doing. I don't care what the province is doing. It starts here. It starts here with your action. What the province is doing, it's secondary.
I think to that, if I could just briefly, to that same point, I think what you've got behind us is you've got a housing system. You've got a whole bunch of people that have a specific lane. You asked specifically about the numbers. And I think to the numbers, there's retaining stock, there's what is needed in our community, and then there's advancing new stock based on that need. You saw a number maybe for the first time here today, which is 3,000. It's a different number because it's not the wait list number. It's actually a number that came through some work that we've been doing with CMHC. And each year, I remember last year, I think Councillor Helmer indicated that in the previous couple of years, we'd had 2,000 or 3,000 units being brought in as new stock to the city. But the new stock isn't going to where the need is. So there's a matching up that needs to happen. So yes, we monitor, I think to answer your question, yes, we monitor very closely. Secondly, our new stock isn't hitting the market where our greatest population growth is in London related to housing need. And I think the third piece that ties into that is also the where and the how. So it's not one strategy, it's not just creating new units, there's also around how do we retain the units that we currently have. So I think what you're seeing with each part of our system is that those are the areas that are covered. And of course, the other big piece is helping support the people.
Thank you. Councillor Squire.
I want to ask you about the second prong of your HDC strategy map. And one of the things people are constantly asking me is when we're going to build buildings. Are we a contractor? Is the Housing Development Corporation a contractor? And I'm sort of happy to see this here. So I'd just like you to help me a little bit. How are you going to become a contractor? How do you see that happening? And what opportunities are there for you to actually build buildings? Because I've heard Mr. Brower talk about that before, and so I'm hopeful you'll be able to move into that area.
To the delegation.
Through the chair, I think understanding what developer means, the greatest developers, and I know you understand this, development is the function of bringing the resources, the strategy, the builders, all together with a viable product. To the degree that we have spent a lot of our past time in working on the programs and the partners, as we get into the new tools, what development means changes, because as we get into the new tools of land, so in the course of the past year, the work that we've done with the surplus lands and the surplus school lands, that brings in new tools. That also brings in new partnerships. So when you're talking about our role in development, although our agreement says that we, or our incorporation says that we could be direct developers, that's not really the goal. The goal is working with the development community, working with the nonprofits, leveraging the land assets that we've got, leveraging the new programs that we're seeing. That to me is the function of development. And so we're no longer relying just on the programs that existed at a federal or provincial level. And I think great examples of that are even the work that we've been doing through bonusing and the work that we've been doing through the school, the surplus lands acquisition strategies.
Thank you. Councillor Van Hulst.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and through you to our guests. That's good. Councillor Squire touched on number 2. I think that's one that people are very interested in because we see schools and things coming up for possible development, and there's a definite need in areas where people, for instance, want to retire, in their neighborhoods. So I guess my first question to you would be, which surplus lands are we looking at? And have we purchased some? Have we got some places where we plan to take on some of these projects?
To the delegation.
Through the chair, municipal surplus lands, there's a policy that is now in effect, but through the city's financial services and realty services, we are a part of all discussions related to municipal surplus lands. We are also party to discussions related to, as you know now, surplus school lands. So in the context of those two areas, one, on the municipal lands, we've been transferred two lands, 122 Baseline and 403 Thompson Road. There are other lands that we have talked to the city about that are not yet ready for transfer or activity. Separate from that, through the schools, and there's a caution here whenever you're talking about development, these are very, very early conversations, so I'm very cautious about where we go related to any conversations about speculative development. But what you do have in the public realm right now is you do have that the London District Catholic School Board has just indicated that 2 school sites are available, and using the Education Act process, we have indicated our interest. And to this point, I think that would be the only depth that I would go into on that. What I will add is that land right now is probably one of the hardest things to get access to. When you're talking about affordable housing, you're competing with everyone else who is looking for land, and at $5,000 plus per linear foot. This is our greatest resource right now. So not only is it land, it's also looking at opportunities where we could be stacking developments. So there's opportunities here that go beyond just land and land acquisition, because as municipal council, you also have other areas where we're doing capital development. And just to that end, we meet very frequently with the city, not just on surplus lands, but on a whole range of strategies.
Thank you. Councillor Van Holst, follow-up?
Yes, thanks. Now, up to this point, I think we've been working with developers to put affordable units in those developments. And so it seems like there's more affordable units, but then we've got less market units because of that. So I'm wondering if you'd comment on that. I realize there's a supply and demand that goes on. If we had more housing in London, then the prices would go down for rents. So we do want to see as much housing happen as possible. As much development will certainly help the affordability of housing.
To the delegation.
Through the chair, I want to make sure I'm understanding the question. I think what you're referencing is the idea that adding as much stock to the market is a good thing because it will create a sense of affordability. Am I understanding that correctly? And if so, okay. I think to that end, London is in a very unique position, and there was an article in the Globe and Mail recently talking about this very thing. London is in a place right now where, if you look at the last couple of years, we're doing a great job adding stock to the city, but how that stock is being absorbed is different than how it is absorbed in other cities. So of the 3,000 rough units that we add on an annual basis, they are not opening up the market because we have such low vacancy rates, because we've got a commodity market that's pretty unique in London. Outside, in a Canadian context, it's very unique. And I think the third thing is that we've got a growth of need, especially when you look at where our jobs are, that is not where the new homes are being built. So right now, we've got a little bit of a disconnect between what's happening in the private market. One of the ways that we can respond is looking at how do we retain units, and there's conversations going on right now with the city. For example, when you are approving a demolition, that demolition may be taking 10 affordable units out of stock, but building 500 units. How do we make sure that when we're doing things like that, we're retaining the units that we had that are affordable? So there's different strategies that we're looking at right now. I'm not sure if that fully gets to your question.
Thank you, Councillor Lehman.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think housing is one of the major issues that is facing this council this term. So what you have to say is very important. I have a two-pronged question here. Later in the meeting, we're going to be hearing from the folks at the London and Middlesex Community Housing Organization. I'm wondering if you could kind of discuss your relationship with them. What do you do that they don't do? Do you work together at things, or do you work at cross purposes as things? And the other part of my question is, we hear a lot of terms, affordable housing, subsidized housing, rent geared to income. I wonder if you could provide us with definitions of what those are and where those fall into with those two organizations.
Two questions to the delegation.
So to the latter question, through the chair, I think, and I don't mean this of us collectively, I think as a sector, I think nationally and in other cities, there's complexity to housing that sometimes there doesn't need to be, mostly because so much has been focused on the programs or on the funding mechanisms that have been there. So we have words like social housing and affordable housing. What I've tried to do, and I think what Ms. Dader-Beers has led the charge in related to managing as a housing system, is the notion of housing affordability. When you take out the social housing and affordable housing, you just talk about what's going on in our community related to housing affordability. It doesn't matter who you're talking to, they've got a connection to the story. The programs are different. The programs, the social housing programs that started back in the 60s and LMCH was created under when they were a part of the Ontario Housing Corporation, are programs that were based on a lot of legislative framework that were funded through very long-term agreements that were highly regulated. And part of what you're going to be hearing tonight from LMCH is their journey as they prepare to leave some of those agreements and to move on to a different reality of what their communities can look like and feel like. That's really what we established about 15 years ago when we started this new path of affordable housing. And the path of affordable housing, what differentiates it is that you're not working within social realm programs, you're actually working with the developers. The whole notion of affordable housing was created on the assumption that you're working with market-based tools. So what we're doing is we're injecting ourselves prior to and during the capital build portion of a project. So if you think about it as a house, by having someone coming in with investments, it reduces the carrying cost of that house, which translate directly into long-term rental affordability. So the program is really where many of the social housing providers are looking for the future. But the context of those programs are just one program. There's also the programs that are available through what you've seen, the bonusing, through using land tools. So those are programs. Supportive housing, I think you named that one as well. Supportive housing speaks to housing where the individuals who are living there require support. That could be in an intensive environment where it's generally called supportive housing, or it could be in a mixed environment where you have people coming and going, providing those services, which is what we try to establish. What you'll see in our strategy is that we're actually advancing and suggesting, and through Council's multi-year strategy, we're suggesting that we no longer just need a strategy for mixed development. We actually need a strategy for specialized housing where those supports are present, because we're seeing so many more in our community needing those kinds of specialized supports. To your first question, the difference is what I just said. Our work is on the capital side. It's understanding the bricks and mortar. It's understanding how development works. It's working with the planning office. It's working with the expertise that I've got on a board, which is incredible. It's incredible to work with these folks who have years and years of development experience and know the tools of land, know the tools of planning, and staff who bring together finance, planning, architectural programs. That's very different from a social housing environment. Yet what's happening in the social housing environment is they're needing those tools. So if I could, we're working from different wheelhouses, from our lanes, but we're working together on a similar path. So if you're talking about health, we all know that there's a difference between the hospital and between a doctor's office and between different functions in health. yet we
Sorry,
have-
we'll just keep our focus to the housing component. I'll
Sure.
let you wrap that up, please.
So the idea is that we function and work together.
Thank you. Councillor Kaibaga.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I'd like to thank you guys for your presentation and for giving more information on where you're at and what you do. I'm also interested in the same conversation that my colleague here just brought up on the relationships between LMHC and your organization, because we're talking about surplus land here that you could potentially have, and how their agreements, LMHC agreements, does not provide them to be able to build new stock. And if we're all working together to address the crisis in our community, and let's really call it for what it really is, there's a huge crisis of housing in our community. And when we're talking about affordable housing, I think this is something that has been quite confusing for a lot of people. When you hear affordable, you think it's affordable, but affordable means different things depending on which level of government you're approaching it from. So I am, however, interested in understanding more on how your organization and LMHC could work together to create new stock and to retain this stock to be able to provide more housing in London. And I know you just kind of, explained on your relationship with the organization. It was very long, and I don't think I personally didn't get a whole lot out of it. In very simple words, can you let us know how your organization can work with LMHC to create new stock? Because in their articles, they're not provided to create new stock. And currently, as we have seen the numbers in the CAPS meeting, the numbers are very high on the waiting list, and I know you guys don't have a waiting list, and I know you guys don't have any buildings that you're currently managing. You said that you work with developers, but I'm interested to know if there's more you guys can do on your end, not to just work with developers. It's a great piece, by the way, to work with developers and encourage the community to participate in this crisis that we have when it comes to housing. And we do have a great example on Dundas Street where a community partner like Indwell came in and took an affordable housing and put supportive housing there. But once again, I'm interested in very simple words that we can, quickly get through for us. There's a lot of conversations to be had and a lot more words to be heard. In very simple words, can you let us know where your organization can fill in this gap? It's a gap that needs to be filled in. We need to have new stock and not just supporting affordable housing, but we're all working towards addressing this housing crisis in London, and I want to see these two organizations work together to address some of the issues that there are. If LMHC is prevented from creating new stock, can you maybe create new stock for LMHC?
Thank you. I'm going to suggest with this, it's a critically important question. We are going to hear from LMCH. Could you provide a tight answer and your thoughts on that, please?
My tight answer through the chair was that we're about to hear from LMCH on their regeneration plans, which we have been incredibly active and supportive of. And I just want to add one other piece, is that when we're talking about working with developers, I just want to make sure that there's an understanding that many of these developers are nonprofit organizations, a large number, and in fact, more and more of them. And some of them are social housing providers as well, who are also going through regeneration plans. So we work with a lot of different needs and a lot of different groups.
Thank you, Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, thank you both for the presentation. I believe we're asking questions about just everything on 3.1. They're not separate presentations for the B, C, D, and E and all that stuff?
There are not.
Okay, thank you. The report, as I read through it, had a couple of questions. They probably have pretty straightforward answers, but obviously you're limited by space and copy that you can put in here. On pages 8 and 9, it talks about your 2016 profile and the 2018 profile about units created and funding leveraged. In 2016, about 8.8 million municipal funds were leveraged, resulting in about 45 million in private equity loans and investments, so about a 5-to-1 ratio. In 2018, 3.9 million of municipal funding leveraged, so a bit less than half of the municipal funding that was available in 16 came forward in 2018, and the leverage ratio is about 2.5 to 1, so that went down a half as well. I've got three questions. The first one's, what are the factors that influence the ability to improve that ratio and increase investment in housing stock?
To the delegation.
So through the chair, there's a number of factors. The first one is that as we go further and further in time, we are seeing the cost of developments increase. We're seeing land costs increase. So, you know, even if you go back 5 years ago when we were seeing development costs around $150 per square foot, now you're seeing them 200 and over per square foot. The other thing that's not in here is you're not seeing the leveraged federal provincial component of that funding. So when you factor in the federal provincial component, you would actually see that we are roughly on par because we are leveraging. Part of what you're seeing in the leveraging of reduced equity is because more of our projects are moving to nonprofit. So nonprofits don't require as much equity on the front end of the project. So what we are really showing in those two charts is that the municipal funds attract, and what we do is we leverage other government programs. How they factor is different from one site to another site.
Second question, Councillor Turner.
Thank you, through your worship. So that's helpful because I think there's a lot that I'm not able to see through this, but it's helpful to have the explanation. Second question kind of takes off from that, recognizing that there's been some discussions at our planning committee meetings about being able to access federal funding, but there's kind of an X factor in there. We're not quite sure what would be required from the municipality. So the question is, what would be required of the municipality to take full advantage of the federal funding opportunities above and beyond what we have as a baseline allocation?
To the delegation.
So through the chair, I would turn your attention to the strategies that are actually in your plan on page 19, the last page of the plan. I want to be cautious on how I respond to this because the requirement is in federal programs is not a requirement of the municipality, it's a requirement of the province. However, for projects to be successful, every cent that's leveraged that is municipal funding is money that goes towards the way these projects are calculated is on an application basis. So it absolutely makes a huge difference. So that's why you're seeing programs now like a community improvement program, which you guys are all familiar with, the work that's being done on a community improvement program for affordable housing. These are essential programs, especially as we're moving more to nonprofit development, because those upfront funds not only are hard to put forward as a nonprofit, but more importantly, those activities. So for example, when you're even in the recent project where you deferred a DC, that was counted to a federal application as a municipal contribution. Our time and effort is counted as a municipal contribution. So what we've tried to structure into your multi-year strategy are those things that advance municipal contributions in kind or in specific funding areas.
And a third question, Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Your Worship, and this is flowing quite nicely because 19 was my next reference. Taking the estimated funding requests, that looks like about $4.6 million in new funding required from the municipality to leverage these opportunities as they're outlined there. Just coming up on about 1% of the total taxation for the city. So this is above and beyond what's currently provided. It also has a question from 18, which looks at the reserve funds and shows almost at a fully depleted balance in the reserve. So how did those two factors play with each other for funding the activities of the HTC going forward?
To the delegation.
So first of all, I can acknowledge that during the time that we've established through the chair some of these strategic areas of investment, because we haven't gone through the multi-year budget yet, and we know that there's a lot of pressure on the multi-year budget without even going down this road. The anticipation is that some of these may have opportunity for growth. However, with some of the new legislative changes that we're understanding are happening, that may be limited. And I'm speaking specifically to Bill 108 and to the community benefits process and the many challenges that that may be faced with that, and there may be opportunities as well. So what we've done is we haven't put source of financing related to this. We understand that there's a magnitude to the dollars, but we also understand that if we're going to look to make a difference, if we aren't doing these investments now, then the challenge is that these are going to cost way more down the road. And because of the leverage amount, so in the dollars that we're putting forward, we believe that there's leverage amounts. So the school surplus lands and the ability to acquire lands, I think is a critical strategy right now, because you now have this incredible, a year ago we were here talking about tools, and there was some challenge about what do we mean by tools. Look at how far we've come in the course of the past year of not only understanding the tools, but as a council, you've put all those tools in place, or a great number of them, and the ones that aren't, we're working on together. Now what we need to do is we need to resource those tools. So we realize that that's going to be a challenging strategy. We understand the pressures are in front of you. What we are doing is we're saying that there's a bold plan here. If we are going to achieve these numbers, this is what we see as being a roadmap to those numbers.
Thank you very much. Councillor Morgan.
Yes, I don't have a question for the delegation, but I thank them for their presentation. But something Councillor Kaibaga said I think is important, and something we've discussed in the past, and that's the way that HDC and LMCH work together. And from my understanding of the scope, and this is maybe for our staff, of the deep dive housing review that we've initiated by KPMG, certainly that is something that will be obviously looked into, the way that both organizations function, their roles, responsibilities, the way that from a governance perspective they operate, that would certainly be within the scope of that review, and that we would expect that review to come back sometime before the multi-year budget. So I guess it's an opportune time for me to ask if our staff know when we anticipate that review coming back, and whether that indeed is within the scope of it, as that was my understanding at the time.
Question back to staff. That would be through... Anyone wish to take that? Ms. Brabon.
Through the chair, we are, KPMG is in process of working on that review. So yes, they are looking at the mandates of the two organizations in conjunction with one another as well. And we're hopeful that we will have a report in hand for the end of next month.
Thank you. I recognize that Councillor Van Holst has another question, but as he has asked a question first, is there anyone who's not yet asked a question? Then I'll turn to Councillor Van Holst. Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have two questions to the delegation about page 16, anticipated timelines. Talks about a capital reserve, and I wanted to know what's the size of the capital reserve you're envisioning? And then the last one talks about an affordable housing foundation. And maybe you could describe briefly how that plays into the plan.
To the delegation.
Through the chair, all of the numbers that are presented, including the strategies, SOC 03, 04, and 05, come from the multi-year strategy, and the details are embedded in that strategy from the year March 25th, I think it was, SPPC. So to the lands, it was $500,000 per year. What we're suggesting is that that be a contribution to an annual contribution to a reserve fund, similar to how we would approach specialized housing, so that as these lands come open, so the idea is mitigate the magnitude of the operating contribution to a capital reserve on an annual basis, but then when opportunities come available, there's a reserve fund there. Really what we're talking about is looking to affordable housing and the lands of affordable housing, similar to how you look to woodlots or parklands or industrial lands. Although those may have different funding mechanisms, the idea of being able to be ready with those strategies means that there needs to be a reserve of some form, and I would defer to the city treasurer on how to best present that. What we're putting forward is an amount that's based on school amounts. To your second question was the timeline, I believe. Can I just confirm?
Councillor Van Holst.
That was about the Affordable Housing Foundation. Some comments about that strategy.
Back to the delegation.
Through the chair, I would suggest that many of us would have familiarity with foundations from either a health perspective or from a university or school perspective, where the function of a purpose-built foundation allows the community to participate through, whether it's endowment or whether it's through land trust. In development, it's a little bit different because you can get into the tools of land trust. If you look to communities, especially in Western Canada and to the US, where you are looking for other sources of financing and other mechanisms and other tools, one of the primary tools is the use of foundations, especially as it relates to land trust. So the ability to assemble and hold value and the ability to engage the community in financial tools, I believe, are essential parts, and these go back to our original business plan back in 2014. And by the way, it was 4 years. I missed when I said 3. This is our 4th year here. So our business case was approved in late 2014, and we incorporated in 2015. It had that as part of its business case.
Thank you. Any other questions for our delegation? Deputy Mayor Helmer.
I don't think I have any questions. I do have a couple of comments. I wanted to say I appreciate the appendix in the presentation where you just lay out the projects, what are we talking about in terms of the number of units and so forth. I appreciate the level of detail too when you talk about the affordability period. I know depending on the project, that's something that changes. And I wanted to remark just on the fact that 50-year affordability periods are very long, and it wasn't that long ago we were talking about maybe we could go from 30 to 35, which was quite remarkable. And now we're talking about 50 years, and I just wanted to comment on that. I know it was raised by Mr. Brower in his presentation around the speed, and I don't want to pick on any one particular project, but I'll just use it as an example. 356 Dundas. You know, I was on planning committee when we had the planning application come forward in 2015. Then in 2016, we had the funding approved at CAPS, and then it's been under construction for quite some time. And eventually, I'm sure it will be renting. And I do think that the speed at which that housing is actually constructed and where there are opportunities to compress things so that they can go faster, I do think we really have to think about how we can do that. I know the other project, the Italian Senior Center, it's going a bit quicker, at least from my perspective. It seems to be going a bit faster. We already dealt with one issue around the development charges. And I think we need to be thinking about how we can be supporting that, because you know, once you miss a construction season, you've missed it for the most part. And I think that this is a key area in terms of how fast we can get the housing units delivered. So I just wanted to say that to my colleagues. I do think it's a good sign that we saw more units under construction last year than as a percentage of the overall number of housing units that are being built. Like, it's gone up, and I think that is great. I think that's great.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions to the delegation? Seeing none, colleagues, 3.1A through D, which includes a recommendation which is on page 18 of the SPPC report to ratify and confirm the annual resolutions of the shareholder and the authorization of annual resolutions. Is there a mover? Councillor Van Holst. Is there a seconder to the mover? Councillor Lehman. Comments or discussion? Seeing none. Oh, Councillor Kayabagha.
Thank you. I just have one last question. We're still going to receive the report from KPMG and still decide on where this is going, or?
I'm told that we can anticipate that relatively soon. I think in the next weeks. Councillor Barbone, do you have any sense of the timing? Ms. Barbone, sir.
Through the chair, we're anticipating that report by the end of next month.
You'd make a great counselor, for the record. I just want you to know. Thank you. Does that satisfy? Okay. Councillor Kayabagha, anything else with that? Is that good? Great, thank you. Seeing no other questions, I'll turn your attention to the screen as we vote.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 15-0.
Let me thank Mr. Brower and Mr. Justizia for your report. That was very helpful, in your comments and responses back. Much appreciated. Thank you. Colleagues, I'll turn your attention to 3.2A. We have a delegation we're blessed to have that. It'll be Sean Quigley, Chair, and Marcy Allen Easton, Vice Chair of London Middlesex Housing Corporation. And as per, and Mr. Brower found, it is 5 minutes, and please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor Holder and members of council. We're pleased to be here today to present to you the London and Middlesex Community Housing 2018 Annual Report. I'm Sean Quigley, as you know, the chair of the board, and this is my colleague and vice chair, Marcy Allen Easton. We're proud to be here representing the board. We have several members of the in chambers today, as well as our senior staff and our tenants who are working hard for. We want to start today's presentation with a short video, so we'll do that right now.
I'm not a stranger to the dark. Hide away, they say. No one wants your broken parts. I've learned to be ashamed of all my scars. Run away, they say. No one look you as you are. But won't let them break me down to dust. I know that there's a place for us. For we are glorious. When the sharpest words won't cut me down. Gonna set the fire, drown out. I am brave, I am bruised, I am who I meant to be. This is me. Look out, 'cause here I come. And I'm marching on to the beat I drum. I'm not scared to be seen. I make no apologies. This is me. It's my skin. Won't fly away. 'Cause today I won't let the shame sink in. We are warriors. We are warriors. Won't let them bring me down to dust. I know that there's a place for us. For we're glorious. The sharpest words won't cut me down. Gonna send the flood, gonna drown out. I am brave, I am bruised, I am who I'm meant to be. This is me. This is me. When the sharpest words wanna cut me down, I'm gonna send a flood, gonna drown 'em out. This is brave, this is bruised, this is who I'm meant to be. This is me. Look out, 'cause here I come. And I'm marching on to the beat I drum. Easy, I make no apologies. This is me. This is me.
And you have 1 minute left.
We want to start with this quote taken from the Canada's National Housing Strategy because it exemplifies the work we're trying to do at LMCH. We know there's a lot of work to be done and lots of opportunity to fix our buildings and support our tenants, but we work each day to bring dignity and respect to our communities.
Okay, when you look at this year's report, our website and other materials, you can see that our name has changed. This is an important evolution for our organization, but more importantly for the tenants we serve in our community. Our new name, London and Middlesex Community Housing, represents our renewed commitment to our tenants, the individuals and families who call our residents home. Our focus as a community housing provider means we aim to provide a home for everyone who needs one and are focused on creating and supporting community in our buildings. To that end, this year we created a community development team. This team drives our internal cultural shift in delivering our commitment to our care values. The community development approach works in partnership with our tenants to provide the supports our community needs to come together. By engaging more deeply and more often, we better understand their needs and can more effectively communicate how we can work to meet them. And when we don't have a quick or easy solution, this relationship and trust helps us create a plan to find a solution that will work for all.
I'm going to stop you there if I may. I know that there will be issues that come up as a result of the Q&A that, because councilors particularly interested in this subject. Colleagues, I wonder this, and I think it might be helpful, at the request of council, we did add an additional delegation totally related to this, and of course it's Josh Brown, the CEO of London Middlesex Community Housing. And I wonder if, with your indulgence, if we asked him to speak then, and then we certainly, if the delegation is comfortable with that, and then we can ask questions based on the whole report to any and all, and I think that might be useful. So with the support of council, I would like to do that, please. Then I wonder, could I ask, set up if Mr. Brown, if you'd like to come forward and provide yours, and then we'll have, by the way, if our delegation is comfortable with that. Yes, please. Councillor Hopkins.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I wonder if we could listen to the presentation. I'm interested in hearing Mr. Brown as well, but I'd like to move an extension just to hear the rest of the presentation. I'd be happy to do that.
I'm going to rule that out of order, but you can challenge the chair, and here's why. I know time would have been put in, which is why time was put into this presentation, which we have all received. I know we've studied it all. I know what will happen then is that the next party will ask that, and then the next delegation after that. We have very strict and specific rules about this, which is why I'm being somewhat clear on this. But you're welcome to challenge the chair, but I'll move that out of order. Councillor Kayabага.
Thank you, Chair. With the utmost respect, I'd like to challenge the chair because this is a very big conversation that needs to be had, and there's no other room for us to have this conversation other than in SPPC. And so we're making, we're going to be doing important things, and housing crisis is a huge thing in our city right now. And I think that it's for the benefit of every councillor that's sitting here. A lot of us are new and haven't had these conversations, and I think that it's important that they finish the presentation that they came to do here. So if I can.
There is a challenge to the chair. There is no debate. I would just remind colleagues we gave 5 minutes to the first party, but there's no debate, and if that was political, I didn't mean it to sound like that. So there's a challenge to the chair. If you support the chair by voting yes, is that how that works? I think we vote yes. The question is, will the chair's ruling stand? I remember that from reading that. So if you vote yes, the chair's ruling stands. If it is no, it does not. I'll turn your attention to the screen.
Closing the vote, and the motion is lost, 5-10.
So noted. When the video finished, our delegation had spoken for 1 minute 15. If it's the pleasure of the of council. We will give them another 3 minutes 45, and then the balance of that you can do through Q&A as we had done with the first, unless there's an objection to that. Seeing none, Mr. Quigley and Ms. Allen Easton. 3 minutes 45 minutes.
Thank you, Council. Okay. Well, in 2008, we collected insights to help us understand more about our tenants, their situations, and their needs. We had 214 saved tenancies, 2,287 complaints investigated and resolved, 553 referrals, and 335 new tenancies. And so who are the people we're working together to serve? Just over 4,700 tenants, our community housing brings together and supports seniors, adults, youth, and children across London and Middlesex County. As you can see, our community provides housing and support for people at all stages of life who have incredibly diverse history, goals, hopes, and dreams. As part of the creation of our community development team, we overhauled our approach to tenant services. As a result, our front customer service staff are now part of our System Navigator team. This team strives to help tenants solve issues first and foremost, so we act as partners in problem solving to keep our tenants safely and supportively housed. We've been fortunate to have many community partners participate in our sites over the years, providing a variety of programs and services to individuals and families. In 2018, we spent purposeful time getting to know our partners and which programs and supports engaged most activity. 59 partners providing 130 programs. One partnership example is our Rookie League and Joe League programs, where our volunteers from the City of London Police Services play basketball and baseball with our youth tenants. Our community development team has been creating tenant advisory committees for each of our sites and has been working with them to develop tenant-led solutions to issues specific to each site. Our buildings are a core asset that allow us to support our tenants. We're committed to providing safe, clean, supportive housing as a driver for dignity and belonging for our communities.
Through your worship, we have $456 million in capital required at this point. That would indeed with an FCI value of 0. Our asset management immediate needs is $60 million. That's really important. This is for high impact building components, which are heightened risk of failure, require extensive coordination to correct, and will severely impact the building's operation. Our investments, you can see here that we're investing in our buildings this year, security, interior and exterior fixtures, as well as mechanical and plumbing and life safety systems. Our assets are in our buildings, but our buildings are home. And I know council is very aware of this. Everyone on this council has spoken to that extensively, and we appreciate that recognition of the issue. In parallel to our important work around our tenants, we've been developing greater financial sophistication in 2018, trying to increase our confidence and supporting the questions asked by council and by staff. We've experienced both significant internal and change initiatives and unanticipated costs. We've demonstrated real financial prudence, and we're able to deliver to our tenant services with only a small overrun in operational budget. In 2018, we completed a zero-based budgeting submission ahead, and our finance team is dedicated to finding financial efficiencies where possible. Here's our finances.
30 seconds, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Here's our finances. You can see that 45.48 is property taxes, insurance, and utilities. Salaries and wages are outlined there as well. Through all of this work, financial accountability, asset management, tenant support and care, we've done it under the guidance of our strategic plan. And I just want to briefly finish up with saying that we are really on target with our strategic plan. 39% of our actions are completed, 33% are on target, and you see that we have only 10% that are on hold.
Thanks very much. I appreciate that. I do appreciate that and the amount of effort it goes into making this kind of a presentation. I'm at the pleasure of council, and that is the comment I made earlier. Council did ask for Mr. Brown as well to have a delegation, and if it's helpful for council, we could hear that delegation now from Mr. Brown, and then we could ask questions of any and all, if that would be useful. Does anyone object to that? So we'll let Mr. Brown set that up, and then we will proceed accordingly. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor Holder and members of SPPC. My name is Josh Brown, as the CEO of London Middlesex Community Housing. I'm absolutely pleased to be here today to actually present a regeneration update from LMHC along with the City of London Housing Services and the Housing Development Corporation. You asked about relationships, but as a collaborative team, we have worked very hard over the past year to create a regeneration plan for public housing that includes defining our vision, our goals, our principles to improve and grow sustainable community housing along with a site evaluation tool. This is our vision statement for regeneration. This guides us and our partners as we work towards a better future for housing in our community. Our plan identifies the shift of LMCH from a legacy Ontario provider, constrained resource capacity, to a truly community housing provider as a catalyst for regeneration. A cultural and operational transformation through regeneration will provide the best outcomes for future housing and tenants. We believe this can be done in two ways. Our regeneration strategy reimagines community housing to include a range of housing options for those living in the gaps of conventional housing markets and provides sustainable social supports to improve community outcomes for more tenants. There is no doubt that our capital needs must be addressed to extend the useful life of our buildings and prioritize where to regenerate. But the data indicates that remediating our current assets requires a two-pronged approach, one of renew and repair and the other one of new development. So the time is now. As we saw in our annual presentation, the need for affordable, accessible, and supportive housing is high in our community, and our rent geared to income system is unsustainable. The London Plan, our city's growth blueprint for the next 20 years, identifies and prioritizes the renewal of social housing stock and includes provisions for increased affordable housing. Housing has become an increased area of focus for London, where the vacancy rental rate for housing in 2018 was approximately 2%, and the housing wait list continues to grow. London and Middlesex County are not alone in these challenges, and thus municipal, provincial, and federal governments have turned their attention to housing. So how to activate regeneration? Well, regeneration activities will allow LMCH to more effectively manage its land's profile or portfolio and improve the quality of housing services through the availability of affordable rental options that support people across their lifespan and housing spectrum. LMCH regeneration will create a diverse tenant base that helps sustain the organization. Our regeneration goals are clear. Build communities, homes, and lives by adding diversity, services, and resources to our neighborhoods. Outlining our intentions at the outset of this process ensures that our purpose, our outcomes, and the success can be planned and evaluated for each site regeneration and social revitalization project. So the question is, where do we begin? Well, regeneration does not happen in isolation. Important, informative, and supportive work is underway at the municipal level, including the city's homelessness prevention and housing plan update, the service review of housing, and also the Affordable Housing Development Planning Toolkit. Also, the National Housing Strategy and Ontario's Community Housing Renewal Strategy will affect our work. LMCH has undertaken significant work to deliver planning documents in 2019 for our core business that supports regeneration. They will provide definition, detail, and clarity to every aspect of our work, including asset management, finance, site regeneration, resource management, and community development and tenant engagement. We have also developed our site evaluation tool that will direct where to start regeneration activities. It's our belief that together we can address the housing needs in our community. In recognizing the Housing Service Review, absolutely will make clear the governance and shareholder changes required for LMCH to continue to deliver and grow. The city can support this regeneration plan by making it possible for us to deliver our goals set out in the plan. More than anything, we need the city to help strengthen the progress we have begun to make as an organization and speak collaboratively to other levels of government about our aligned vision for more housing through this regeneration plan.
30 seconds.
This is our site evaluation tool. I won't go through, obviously I don't have time, but they are identified in the report. The next step for us is to finalize the entire regeneration plan, including the assessment of our site evaluation criteria and the creation of a champions table, which we've asked council to do. Certainly a lot of people to acknowledge. There's a lot of work being done, not only from our organization, but from the Housing Development Corporation and London City Services. So in closing, LMCH has made significant strides over the past 2 years. We are relentless in strengthening our community partnerships while planning and maximizing our existing resources down to the last dollar. But most importantly, we have been serving the people in this community who need us most to the best of our ability under the circumstances.
Thanks
We
very
all
much.
know that status quo approach to housing is no longer an option. And as the political will emerges to every tool at our disposal to address this need, we want council to know unequivocally that we are ready to go.
Thank you very much. Let me thank both delegations. I know this is a lot of information, and the fact we have both two delegations from LMCH is helpful. And I would invite Ms. Allen Easton, Mr. Quigley, and Mr. Brown to come forward as questions may come up from council, and I will invite colleagues if they have questions to ask. Councillor Squire to start.
Mr. Chair, through you, I don't want any of my comments to be taken as criticism or anything like that of the group. I've been here for 5 years now, and one way or another, I've heard the same message almost every year that I've been here, that what you need is a massive influx of money, capital. And I was at a meeting, and a fellow got up at the meeting while I was there, and he'd heard about some of these numbers, and he was furious at me because the city had not yet written a check at that time for $220 million to London Middlesex Community Housing. And I explained to him that we have a budget and we have limited funds. And when I look at your model, I worry because you're spending almost 70% of your operating expenditures on taxes, insurance, and utilities, and maintenance of repair, and absent the city contribution of about $11 million a year, there wouldn't be sustainability. So I'm having huge difficulty to see where the change comes. And I don't think that's from any bad intent or anything like that, but these numbers just get larger. And every year we come back, the infrastructure gap is bigger and the properties are deteriorating more and the gap gets bigger. So I guess my question is, when are we going to have something presented to us that actually presents a path to a solution rather than an identification of the problem? And I'm asking Mr. Brown that question.
Mr. Brown.
Thanks through the chair. You're absolutely right that RGI's unsustainable model, our revenues have been fixed through the province since 1993, while our costs continue to escalate. I think the challenge for us in recognizing there absolutely is potential, it's not just a funding issue. We've come forward multiple times over the last year to say the shareholder agreement needs to be open and expanded to allow us to do different things so we can be more self-sufficient in terms of the funding. But I think there's also a great opportunity to utilize the lands that we do have, and through work with HDC and through the regeneration plan, which will actually come back to council at the end of this year, which will be solid and concrete, and it will be based on a sustainable model because we know the current model of RGI does not work long-term. Thank you.
Thank you. Follow-up, Councillor Squire.
So about 2 years ago, I was asking the same questions, and Mr. Gustasia was standing there saying, we're moving ahead, Mr. Brown and I are joined at the hip, we're moving together, and here we're sort of here again. And you know who I worry about? I worry about the people who are living in the buildings, that are living in deteriorating buildings and are calling me and saying, this isn't livable, I've got bed bugs, I've got this, I've got that. And I know you're doing your best, but we're coming up to a multi-year budget, and when, can you give me a date or an idea?
Mr. Brown?
Yep, through the chair, the regeneration plan will actually go to our board. It is almost done at this point. It's probably over 300 pages long. So the amount of work that has gone into this document over the course of the last year is significant. It is way more than what we put in front of you. This actually lays the foundation in terms of the vision, mission, objectives, and how we're going to work towards achieving those goals that will be absolutely laid out for council. So, thank you.
Councillor Hopkins.
Thank you, and thank you very much for the presentation. I really do appreciate it. Not being on the board for over 6 months, I need to be updated, and thank you. You've given us a lot of information. Just following up on what Councillor Squire was asking about the regeneration strategy and how that's going to move forward with our budgeting process and the need for money obviously is there. We heard from finances, that the KPMG report's going to be done towards the end of July, so we'll probably be given more information. But the regeneration strat plan will be coming back to us at the end of the year. Is that going to be enough time for us as a council to understand this massive report as we go into budget deliberations and just having a better understanding? Obviously, the need for funding is there, but it's important information that we get.
Yeah, and through the chair, absolutely. We're not working in isolation. Very much working in collaboration with the City Housing Services, with their finance team, with HDC. A part of our discussion is absolutely in support of a multi-year budget that comes forward that's going to support regeneration, but also our strategic vision. One of the things I do want to make mention of in terms of funding and sustainability, the National Housing Strategy does have co-investment for renew and repair, and we were working closely with CMHC on an application for that funding. So there are other avenues that we are pursuing. This is not just coming back to council and say, hand out, we need more. We're looking at every opportunity we can to make sure that the stock is taken care of, but most importantly, we're serving the needs of the people that we're trying to serve.
Thank you. A follow-up, Councillor Hopkins?
Yes, please, and just sticking with the money piece, because obviously there is a need for this money. How do you see us as a council? What can we do to sort of help promote the need for Linden Middlesex community housing for the amount of dollars that it is required?
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor Hopkins, and thank you also, Councillor Squire. I know you're both strong advocates for the people we serve. We have a serious problem, and we recognize that the city of London only gets 9 cents on every tax dollar to address what is essentially a $500 million problem. The only option we really have as a community is for us to work really closely with council and with staff and with HDC to speak with one voice to the other levels of government and to begin to build in a long-term approach to addressing some of the problems that Councillor Squire rightly pointed out. Unless we begin that process earnestly, and our regeneration plan, as well as our annual report and our strat plan are all part of that, I think we'll be seeing this, as Councillor Kaibaga rightly pointed out, this crisis continues. We have a very specific group of people that we serve, those who normally can't afford what is termed affordable housing, the rent geared to income housing. So it's going to be a long process, and we're really eager to work with all the parties we've just mentioned.
Final follow-up?
Yes, and just going on, thank you for that. I wanted to understand the changes with the stakeholders agreement. So we've got the KPMG report coming in July, and getting back to the need for funding for LMCH, why are the changes in the stakeholders agreement important, and when will that come back to us, and understanding that process?
To the delegation.
Thank you, through the chair. I'm just going to answer the first part of this is the reason that that's important and when it will come back. So the reason it's important is because we have no mechanism to use our own assets to be leveraged to do our own regeneration. There are other parts that our CEO will speak to. When we'll come back is once we're through the KPMG audit, and we're able then to move proactively past that. I'm going to let our CEO speak.
Mr. Brown, do you want to add to that?
Just to say very, very specifically in terms of our ability to actually even manage reserves. So how we're funded is that we're funded to a break even. So if we have surpluses at the end of the year, it comes back to the city. If we have deficits, you're actually funding it. That makes it very difficult sometimes to plan long term and to include sustainability as it relates to the housing portfolio in general. So among other things. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hillier.
Yes. On page 23 regarding operating expenditures percentage breakdown, how do we compare to other municipalities?
To the delegation.
I think we're relatively in the middle of the pack when it comes to not only expenditures, but also revenue. So we've taken a look at that over the course of the last couple of years. We are actually sit on a provincial LHC, so local housing provider form, where we look at benchmarks and KPIs and actually have a comparative. So I'd say in relative terms, we're probably in the middle of the pack when it comes to both revenue expenses.
Thank you, Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, thanks to the delegates for their presentation. So looking at the I guess the capital life cycle maintenance, which is a fairly large number. That's the one that's going to pull everybody in like headlights. So that's to get the FCI value to zero for a complete investment of $456 million over the next 10 years, or about $45.6 million, just to maintain the current status. Like status quo is about $22 million per year over the next 10 years, which is tenfold what our current capital investment is that flows through the reserve. Now, that amount is an annual amount, which kind of becomes an operational expense for us as it goes into the reserve and then over into the capital for that. Let's say $456 million were to arrive, to do that work. What becomes the life cycle maintenance cost for us on an ongoing basis at that point? Does it return back to $2.2 million? Does it elevate? Also, I guess, what opportunities are there for us to finance that? Because $45 million is probably not achievable on an operational cost for our operational budget. How do we get there? Do we finance and debt finance that? We've been trying to move towards life cycle, operationalizing the life cycle replacement costs or upgrades rather than doing it through debt financing.
Mr. Brown.
Through the chair, great question, and I don't have all the details in front of me. What I can speak to is that we are in the final stages of having an asset management plan, which we've never had as an organization. It really becomes a risk management strategy than really an asset management strategy, because within that big chunk that you've identified in the report, it talks about 60 million out of those high-risk items that we don't have a choice, and those include your elevators, your life safety systems, those types of things. Absolutely, we do have to look at how we finance that. That's part of the discussion with CMHC, with the city. One of the challenges that we do have, and this goes back to the structure, is the PSAB rules, so the public accounting rules that you fall under, that any type of debt that we would take on as because you are a shareholder, impacts the city's debt ceiling. So we're going to have to work through and talk to city finance in terms of how we actually take on debt, but that is one of the strategies that we're looking at. Thank you.
Thank you. Follow-up, Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, perhaps to Ms. Barbone. I'd imagine this has been an ongoing conversation between LMCH and the city in terms of contemplating what strategies we might use to address part of it, if not all of it. How would we be looking at something of that magnitude for the city to be able to help in some way?
Ms. Barbone?
Through the chair. So some of that is contemplated to, as we work on our multi-year budget, that we'll be looking at opportunities. I mean, obviously, debt, contributions to reserve funds, potentially grants or loans from the federal, provincial government as well. So working with CMHC as to what opportunities are available. So those are potential ways to try to limit the amount of debt that the city might need to do. But I would imagine that it would likely be a multi-pronged approach to look at ways to do that. Certainly when you look at that is one of the things you need to be cognizant of is how much actually can be done at any given point in time. Is obviously that's a tremendously big number, but there's a certain capacity of how much can actually be done in a given year, which might be able to spread that out over a period of time and to look at some of the cost benefit of an investment now versus the cost later, and looking at what the level of the state of the stock would be to see if there's an ideal way to look and maybe spread that out over a longer period of time. So those are all tools and different ways we'll be looking at over the long term and see how that impacts the broader City of London budget as a whole and the tax levy as well.
Thank you. Councillor Plaza.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to our presenters today. Thank you for the presentation, and certainly I know everyone on this Horseshoes had this concern of housing in the city. I'm wondering if there is a plan coming forward, recognizing how many new tenancies you have, but also the state of our stock and how many empty units are waiting just because of the repairs that need to be made. They're just completely uninhabitable. And how many units are on the verge of becoming uninhabitable if we don't come up with the funds required, if there's a plans of how much money it's going to cost to fix what's urgent needs to be fixed, and then plus fixing what's currently empty, recognizing that winter is always coming.
Mr. Brown?
Yep, through the chair. As previously stated, we do have an asset management strategy that we're working towards and finalizing, of which would include how do we actually regenerate those units and get into those units and fill units. Vacancy for us is always an ongoing, it seems to be an ongoing issue. We don't necessarily control the vacancy, we control how we can respond to those. There's been increased pressures on our budgets as it relates to the cost to renew and repair those units as they come back to us. And the other piece to this is it's a balancing between responding to the current tenant need and their needs around work orders and the urgency of those work orders. As you saw in the report, we have about a 2,000 increase in terms of the work orders alone. So it is a balance. We recognize this is an issue. This was brought up in, I think, CAPS, I believe, last week. Our vacancy is higher than what you see in the community, and we've put in a plan together to actually address that and work with the housing services. Because part of the challenge, too, as a provider looking for and trying to fill units of the most vulnerable people in this community, getting in touch with them when housing becomes available is sometimes a challenge. So it's a kind of pronged approach. It's not one particular thing, and we're addressing it. And we think we can actually address this issue to the point where we bring our vacancies down to about 2% by the end of this year.
Thank you. Other comments or questions for our delegation? Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you, Worship, and I also thank the delegation and London Middlesex Community Housing for embracing what it means to be a music city and raising the bar for AGM presentations. I'm not sure how London Hydro is going to top that music video, so thanks for that. I wanted to ask just a couple questions about the financials. I would point out you do a very good job of budgeting just when you connect the budget to the actuals. That's very close. I was impressed with that. I'm looking at page 98 of our agenda, the allowance for doubtful accounts. I know that went from, in 2017, 945,000 down to 417,000. So that allowance dropped about $500,000. I was wondering if that was a write-down or because those amounts were paid.
To the delegation, please.
Yep, through the chair. We write off debt as it occurs, or accounts receivable or bad debt. So at the end of the year, we do an allocation based on the people that have moved out. So it's not typical in terms of accounting, in terms of an allocation, but we write those off. So we have seen and continue to work and look at how do we best work with our tenants to ensure that they don't get into that position in the first place. So we have to write them off at the end of the year.
Thank you. Is there a follow-up, Councillor?
If you don't mind, the FCI index from 0 to 1, I noticed it referred to in there, but I didn't see what ours was. Do we have the actual figure?
Mr. Brown?
I do, and currently our average portfolio is just under 0.35.
Follow-up? Councillor?
No, so typically that's, it's to 2 decimal places, what you would expect that index.
To the delegation, please.
Yeah, so the FCI, so the Facility Condition Index actually averages or takes the amount of deficiencies in your deferred maintenance, your renew and repair, and then divides that by the current value of the asset. And the range is always in between 1 and 0. 1 being completely deficient and falling down, and 0 basically meaning a perfect condition in terms of a building.
Thanks very much. Deputy Mayor Helmer.
Thank you. I wanted to say I appreciate the next steps section where it's talking about how to evaluate the sites. I think that's really helpful for folks to understand all the different factors that you're going to be considering. I wanted to ask through the mayor question for the delegations. In terms of support to tenants, once regeneration happens, there's good ways for that to happen where you're minimizing displacement, you're supporting people through the regeneration activities, they're getting into newer and better units in a relatively short order. I wonder if you could just speak to how you're going to be supporting tenants through the actual regeneration process once you've actually identified sites and you're starting to undertake the work.
Mr. Brown?
Yeah, through the chair. Well, first we start with, they're at the center of what we do. Part of the challenge of coming forward with a regeneration plan, when you have 7 sites, large townhouse sites that we're going to have to do, we can't do those all at once. And in recognizing that these are people's homes, we have to be able to demonstrate, why are we starting where we're starting, because they're always going to be a kind of a winner loser in this situation. And once we were able to do that, we will have ongoing and real dialogue with those tenants, because these are their homes and this is their community, and what are their needs, and not only current but future. So they're very much at the heart of what we do, and that's why we embedded in the principles. If you read the report, they're basically there, and we are going to do everything we can to mitigate any type of risk, recognizing that when you potentially tear down a building, there is some significant transition that needs to happen and some cost involved to ensure that those tenants are taken care of.
Thank you. Is follow-up?
Yeah, just briefly, I would say, I know it's a rigorous process to evaluate these things. In terms of the very first one, I hope you find a spot where you can build some new stuff without having to take anything down, because that'll give you the empty space. I know you know this kind of stuff, but I think that very first one is really important, that there's an opportunity to create some new units before anything else is happening, and give you that kind of swing, I guess you can think of it as like swing space if people need to move into the new units before other things are happening. I just wanted to flag it. I'm sure that it's top of mind for you folks. I did want to say as well that there's a number of items in the strategic plan related to this presentation and also the previous presentation that have budget implications, and I look forward to the discussion in the multi-year budget about how we actually provide some of the funding in the short term that's going to help to meet some of these needs, because by my count, it's about $6 million in operating and $5 million in capital just from the strategic initiatives at the top of strengthening our community. So,
Thank you, Councillor Deputy Mayor Helmer. Before I recognize, prior to recognizing Councillor Turner again, is there anyone who has a question that has not yet asked a question? Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Your Worship. Really quickly, I'm madly trying to go through my files here, but I can't find it. The public, let me get the name of it proper. The Public Housing Major Upgrades Reserve itself. That's the fund to which we place $2.2 million a year, and then from that reserve is drawn for the major capital upgrades for London Middlesex community housing. Does that have a balance other than the flow through? Has it accumulated a balance, or is it pretty much a contribution and drawdown that's just revenue neutral each year?
Through the chair, I'm sorry, I don't have the number right off the top of my head. I can get that for you. But it does have a balance in it. It's not extremely significant because the expectation is that the capital plan will draw through that each year, but there is a balance that has accumulated in that reserve fund. And if you give me a few moments, I can get what that is.
Thank you. Follow-up?
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. You're probably going to have to do the same thing I was trying to do, so I wasn't sure if you had it offhand. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Any final comments or questions to the delegate? Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the delegation, thank you very much. I understand where Councillor Squire was coming from with his comments, but I also have seen I have seen the level of information and the depth of your planning improving each and every time you come before us. And I know that this is a long problem that's been a long time in the making, and trying to get out from where you are right now, I recognize as a very onerous task. I also recognize that you have always been viewed and perhaps in previous iterations viewed yourselves, not through you, Mr. Mayor, not the people before me, but the organization itself, as merely a landlord, as merely dealing with bricks and mortars. And even today, we're talking about regeneration of stock and rebuilding new stock. There's a huge aspect to what you do now that's the supports that go along with that. And so we're talking about finding the financial means to deal with the bricks and mortars. How do we deal with the supportive side that goes along with everything that you do?
To the delegation, please.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Cassidy, through your worship. The fact of the matter is we have a growing series of social crises in the city. His worship, the mayor, has spoken about this. Councillor Squire has spoken about this. Councillor Lewis has spoken about this. There isn't a councillor who's spoken to these issues. And we don't have a means of being able to address what are multiply complex people and their lives and their issues. We're working very hard through our community development team and through our tenant services team to try and do what we did, connecting people to service. Part of the reason we have so many partners is we work hard to make those connections. But frankly, it's not enough. And we know that the municipality doesn't have the ability to provide us instantly with $456 million, nor does it have the ability to fund these programs that are immediately needed. This is a longer-term project that we're going to have to work with one voice to the other levels of government and make that work.
Thank you. Follow-up, Councillor Cassidy?
Just a follow-up comment. So I appreciate the collaborative approach that we're now seeing with you, with HDC, with the City of London staff, and I think that's the same kind of approach that has to be engaged going forward. And I'm saying that through the mayor, not just to you, but to city staff sitting there in the back row, and understanding that the work you do, the work that our staff do, is that you all come to this work with a level of passion and dedication and commitment, and I'm hopeful to see collaboration across the board in all the aspects of your work.
To the delegation, Ms. Ellen Easton, please.
Yes, thank you, first of all, Councillor Cassidy, for being a constant support. It's very appreciated, as well, the other councillors. When I came on this board about 4.5 years ago, I came on with a bit of a vengeance. You guys have heard me speak before. I come with lived experience, and I came with, arms blazing. Stuff needs to happen. It needs to happen now. In the past 4 years, I've seen an incredible amount of work done. We've got a CEO change. We put together a strat plan. We've worked with our staff to change some of the attitudes, some of the way they work with our tenants. We've worked with our tenants to make sure that we understand their needs moving forward. I have seen more work in the past 2 years than I did in the time before, and as watching from the sideline prior to that. It's been incredible. I understand we come and we ask for money. We do. This is the third time that I've been here saying that. We have to. We need the money. It has to come. We have to come and ask. As you're the shareholder, that's what we're going to do. But we do have a plan. We put forth the changes to the shareholders agreement. That's the path that we want to take. So we have put forth that plan, Councillor Squire. We would like for you to consider allowing us to move forward with that, because that's part of the pathway forward. And once we have that in place, then we can come to you with an even more robust plan. Now that we have the ability to make these changes and to do the things that we need to do, then we can come back to you at that time and say, here's what we got, here's what we want to do moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for our delegation? Well, firstly, let me then say, Mr. Quigley, Ms. Allen Easton, Mr. Brown, thank you very much for your presentations. That was important in your Q&A as well. And colleagues, we have items A through G, G being the additional item on the agenda, LMCH board appointments, that's to be received. I would like to vote on E separately with your support. That is to look at consideration of appointments to LMCH, requiring 2 board of directors members and 1 council member. So I'm looking through A through G with the exception of E, and I'll look for a mover. Councillor Van Hol, seconded by Councillor Hopkins. Comments or questions? A through G, and we'll deal with E separately. Councillor Kayabaga.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Actually, maybe it's a question for you or to staff. I know that we talked about having more board members, as the board has requested that. I did request in the last conversation we had over this that we do approve a member from the community who lives in housing on the board. And that was something that I was told we're gonna be able to discuss through, after the KPMG review comes back. So I wonder if we can maybe refer this back before we make a decision on approving 2 new members on the board.
If that's the case, since we're going to deal with that item E specifically separately, may I ask you to bring that forward in that particular point? I think it's a great point, but can we deal with that when we vote on that one separately? Because we
This
will
is-
exclude E to be dealt with separate from the rest of the items in this report.
This is in B.
In which, please?
This is in B.
In D, the recommendation.
B.
E, and E we're dealing with separately.
Oh, okay.
So that's exactly the intention. So with the exception of E, and seeing no other comments, except from the clerk, which is always important. Clerk, do you wish to make a comment?
Thank you. Through your worship, if the committee proceeds to approve the shareholder resolutions, then you are in effect changing the composition of the board. So you may want to deal with, as I have it outlined and drafted here, the Part B about the shareholder declarations prior to, or separately, from what I'm hearing in the discussion, because you're already de facto approving it with that bylaw.
So I'm, clerk, you have a thought?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I just want to clarify. So you'll notice on the staff report, there are 2 bylaws attached. Appendix A, which is the bylaw to change the composition to add another member at large and an additional member of council. B is the shareholders resolution, which includes the appointments. So my assumption is you want to only pass A, which is amending the composition, and then you want to deal with Appendix B separately, which is the appointments.
Are colleagues comfortable with that? Councillor Cassidy? You're good. I just saw that expression. I was mindful. Okay, great. So clerk, just for the purpose of what we're voting on now, would you just direct us through so it's extremely clear what it is we're voting on?
So what you are approving is Part A of the staff report, which is the bylaw to change the composition, and then you are receiving all of the delegations and the information that was provided by LMCH. And you're also receiving the added material, which is the letter from LMCH with respect to recommendations from appointments. So that you're approving everything except the bylaw that does the appointments to the board of directors, because you have more applications than you have positions.
Consistent with what Councillor Kayabaga was referencing. Any comments or questions about that? All right, so with that exemption, let's turn our attention to the screens as we, Councillor Helmer, Deputy Mayor Helmer today.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask through the chair to Councillor Kayabaga. I certainly understand about wanting to wait to make the appointment until after the review, but the bylaw change itself. So, we would make this change and we change the composition of the board. We could add another councillor now or sometime in the short term. Sometime in the future, we could make the citizen appointment. So I just wonder if we need to hold up the bylaw changes or if those could go ahead now and then we could just defer the appointment to wait till after the review and then deal with that in the future.
Councillor Kayabaga, would you be comfortable with that?
So the reason why I said to wait is because the last time I asked this question, it was that we had to change the shareholders agreement in order to do that. So if we can approve it today, I'd be more than happy to approve it today. But the last time I had asked this question, if we can approve a member from housing, who lives in housing, to be on the board, they said they would have to review the shareholders agreements in order to do that. So if we don't have to do that, I'm more than happy to approve it today.
Thank you, Councillor Kayabaga. Can I mention that the composition of the Board of Directors has already decided vote of council, so that's done. So what we're really deferring at this stage, if it's the pleasure of colleagues as amended, it would be to exclude the specific individuals for tonight's vote. Any comments or questions about that? So with that, would someone like to second that, since it was a great motion?
I have been.
Councillor Hopkins?
I just want a little bit more clarification here. Are we including the bylaw now, which is B, and removing E, or are we still with removing the bylaw? And again, if I could have clarification why we need to remove that.
Clerk?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, what is on the floor currently is approving receiving all the information that we received today, and the Appendix A bylaw, which is simply the bylaw to implement council's decision made previously, which was to change the composition. The only thing being held back is Appendix B, the bylaw for Appendix B, which is the actual appointments of the people to the board.
Any comments or questions about that? Councillor Cassidy?
I have a separate comment or question that's separate from that, but related
Please.
to the entire motion.
Do you want to share that now, or shall we keep that as a surprise? Your pleasure.
I would like to, an anonymous motion that nobody can see, but everybody gets to vote on it. No, I note in the letter that was attached to the, from London Middlesex Community Housing, there was a specific request that went along with their regeneration plan, and it's in the second last paragraph of the letter that's on page 132 of the agenda package, that they were requesting that civic administration be directed to strike a regeneration table that would include critical civic administration roles to inform, align, and advance recommendations to expedite and strengthen regeneration efforts. So that wasn't specifically addressed in any of our conversations. So through you, Mr. Mayor, to civic administration, what, is there comment from staff on that if we were to include that in our motion today?
Staff wish to respond. Ms. Dietersbeer.
Through the chair, thank you for the question. I think we are working on regeneration. There's been a request for that kind of task force to be put together. So I think if council directed us to do that, we would do that.
Councillor Cassidy, any other comment on that?
Yeah, I would like to add that as a part, are we on HIJ? Is there a J? Maybe as a part J, that we direct civic administration to work with LMCH on a regeneration plan, or continue their work with LMCH.
So you would like to add that in this committee meeting? All right. Would you have a seconder for that?
I saw someone over there, Councillor Hopkins.
Councillor Hopkins, comments or questions with respect to adding J? Any questions about what J is again, as it relates to regeneration? Councillor Hopkins.
I have no problem seconding it. I know staff are already working alongside LMCH, so it just makes it very clear in our recommendations as we move forward.
Thank you. I'm sorry, and I apologize. I was referencing the clerk on this item. That we caught earlier. If it's the pleasure of council, I would have us add J to that, and then we would vote on that in its entirety with the exception of Appendix B. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, turn your attention to the screen as we vote.
Closing the vote, that motion's passed 15-0.
Well, that was simple. That leaves us with one item which is still within there, which is Appendix B. And I would imagine, since it was the determination of colleagues that we review that at a future date, I'd like to have a motion to that effect. Councillor Turner, is there a seconder? Councillor Kayabaga, comments, questions? Turn your attention to the screen as we vote. Councillor Kayabaga.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to clarify a little bit of, on what I meant, because I think there's a misunderstanding. On B, and we just voted on B, I specifically asked, and this was from the last time that we had this conversation, that we do approve a member from the community who lives in housing. And I was told that we'd have to review the shareholders agreement first before we do that. So my question was, are we able to have a member from housing that can be approved on the board? And are we able to do that today? And if we can do that today, then I'd like to do that. And if we can't do that, then we can refer it. But this motion here is kind of vague, and I'm not sure if it captured what I was trying to say.
I know thank you, Councillor. I know that the motion, and I apologize if I misunderstood, but I thought the direction that I heard through you was that we wanted to defer voting of specific individuals until after the KPMG report. That's what I thought I heard. If that's not what you intended, then it's certainly what I heard. So, and what we put the vote on at this point is that we defer this to a future meeting, the Schedule B relating to the individuals that we would pick. And it's not to say, I would presume at that time, we couldn't get to that stage of having someone in that position, presumably, but that's not what we were, I certainly wasn't the direction to council. Councillor Kayabaga?
So regardless on when we vote for that, I just wanted to make sure that what I was talking about specifically in the last meeting and in this meeting is that we do approve a member from the housing, that lives in housing on the board. And that's what I was trying to talk about this time. And the reason why I said maybe we can refer it was because I'm sure we don't have candidates listed right now that we can vote on, but we can certainly vote on a counselor who can get on the board. But this is why I kept saying we can pull B aside and vote on B. And I think Deputy Clerk had kind of grasped that, but we just voted, and it still doesn't capture what I was trying to say. So is there a way we can I can move a motion to?
Yeah, if I might, before we move a motion, and I'll defer to colleagues on this, but it would seem to me that we can deal with the issue of the specifics of the individuals. There were certainly some recommendations, as we know from LMCH, with respect to individuals, and they were looking for 2 broader board members and 1 council member to join their board, which by deferring this, assuming it gets supported, it will be dealt with at a future meeting. And frankly, I don't even know if the individual or that category, bear with me a second, Councillor Hopkins, I see it, is even in this list or of consideration. That's certainly, I think, the choice of council to make that decision. Councillor Hopkins, do you want to bring some enlightenment to this?
Yes, Mr. Chair, just for a bit of clarification, I would like to ask through you to the clerk, given what Councillor Kawabaga is suggesting, that she would like an appointment made towards the end of July when the shareholders agreement comes forward, can we, there's still a council position, and we are reappointing also Anna Marie Evans. Can we do that tonight and then refer Councillor Kawabaga's appointment further down?
I might say, since this is council and this is our choice at a committee, we can do whatever we like. And I say that in the most thoughtful way. But before we do, the question might be just a function of timing for a month's sake. But I'm mindful if it's the will of council at this committee meeting to want to make some determinations today, we can. Or as per the motion that's on the floor, we can, this basically is in a month from now and deal with it then. I'm at the pleasure of council on this. Councillor Kawabaga, you wanted to say something, please?
Thank you, Chair, for allowing this discussion to happen. But to me, it doesn't matter if we appoint people today or in the future. I just want to make sure that in the wording, as we had talked about in the last meeting, again, and keep circling back on this, we agreed that we were going to either vote on allowing a member from who lives in housing to get on the board, because currently a member who lives in housing cannot be on the board of LMHC because there's a conflict of interest. And I'm looking to address that piece before we leave this meeting today. And I think that's why I was trying to pull B apart so we can address that. But even if we refer it to a next meeting, this specific issue I'm bringing forward has not been addressed, and we're gonna have the same conversation because I'm gonna be bringing it forward again until we kind of address it. So is there a way or room to do that today so that, and if we still wanted to appoint a counselor and Anne Marie Evans, we can do that. But to me, it doesn't matter. I just wanna see us having the liberty to appoint someone who lives in housing on LMHC on the board.
I understand your point. I think you've articulated it exceptionally well. I think the question is timing and acknowledging that we've just approved the bylaw. That's the first thing that we did. So then the question becomes the individuals, which I think you may well have some opportunity to speak to that at some length at our next meeting when we discuss it. Because I think you're looking for a category more than a name. Having said it, we have approved the bylaw, and I would think that if we're looking for a name, that might be something that you would recommend at the next meeting, appreciating that we have some names that have been put forward and recommended, plus others at large. It's not just those who've been recommended by LMCH. We've got some at-large board members. That was not considered when that was reviewed, I do not believe, this list that's here. But Councillor Kawabaga, you have another thought?
maybe we can amend this motion to approve, the two other members who can get on the board, and then, refer another person to be appointed at a later date, if that would simplify this whole process.
Well, it doesn't, insofar as the motion that's on the floor right now, at least, is that we defer those appointments until the next meeting. So that's what's on the floor, but I'm at the pleasure of colleagues. Deputy Mayor Helmer, can you bring some insight to this?
Well, I don't know about insight, but I'm going to suggest that we pass the bylaw that is included in the package for today's meeting. If we do that, we will be filling out some of the vacancies, but there will still be one vacancy in the future. So not all the positions will be filled. If there is an article in the shareholder declaration that needs to be amended to allow for what Councillor Kayavaga is talking about, we need to deal with that separately, and we should deal with that, I think, at a future meeting, because nobody has the declaration in front of them. We don't know exactly what this amendment would be. And I think if that's a direction that we want to go in, we probably should hear from either London Middlesex Community Housing or our staff about which specific article we're talking about. Like, what is it in the shareholder declaration that is preventing this? There are some provisions around conflict of interest, which we know has come up in the past as the reason. It's not clear to me, having looked at it, which article specifically is actually preventing someone from being on the board. I'm not sure that that's really the case. Or that a change needs to be made to have that happen. So maybe we could get a bit more specific about it, and if we want to have that changed to allow for what Councillor Kayavaga is talking about, we should vote on that, because we've never had a vote on that. And we should at least give the direction to staff to come back with an amendment to the shareholder declaration. But I think we need to get a bit more specific about what we're talking about that needs to change.
Are you comfortable with that, Councillor Kayavaga? Please. You are, okay. So we'll withdraw your direction towards a motion at this point. But there's a motion on the floor, and the second motion, since we've approved the bylaw, now is to deal with that second component, which is to defer the composition board of directors. Basically, we're talking about Appendix A, Appendix B, till after to our next meeting, basically. That is the motion that's on the floor. Moved. I don't know if there was a seconder, though. Do we have a seconder on this?
The vote is open. The vote's open.
I thought it was. We were getting close to voting. Councillor Turner, we were.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't want to weigh in.
You don't have to, but it's a pleasure.
I know I don't, but we've started the vote and we're in the middle of a debate after the vote's already been called. That's the challenge here. But I mean, if the question is the composition and that's what we're passing, I don't know why we wouldn't just pass the composition rather than defer it at this point and then just keep vacancies until such point as they were filled.
Yeah, just to help clarify, we have already passed the composition. Schedule 1, that was already part in the motion first. This is the Appendix B, which talks to the specifics under Schedule 1 of individuals. So we've already passed composition, we're good with that, that's done. So we're now just dealing with the issue of specifics, gets to Councillor Kayavaga's point and others that have been made. So there's a current vote. We don't normally debate during the process of voting, but I thought that it deserved clarification because it was brought up in a thoughtful way, and that's helpful. So, and I thought insurance was fun. Councillor Cassidy.
Well, I'm confused because, Mr. Mayor, you keep talking about deferring B, and yet on screen, it's deferring C. So I'm confused.
Deputy Clerk, would you give us wisdom?
So the vote that's open presently is Part C of the broader motion that we have in its totality, which references specifically Appendix B, which is the second bylaw that was in the staff report.
That was easy.
Thank you
Councillor
very much.
Vettelholz, did you have a question, since we're having a really interesting time with this?
Thank you. I notice here that the terms for all the directors end at some time in the future, the earliest term ending December 31st, 2019. So there's no impact for us to refer this to a future meeting.
Thanks, duly noted. Any other comments or questions as we continue the vote? If you have not yet voted, then you should vote.
closing the vote, the motion's passed, 13-2.
Colleagues, thank you for that. I know that was quite involved, and I really think it speaks in part to the complexity of the issues and probably the poor chairmanship of the meeting. But I would tell you that, that when we've had two organizations and three delegations on this issue, there's a lot to consider, especially when members of council feel so passionately and positively about doing the right thing. So thank you all for your indulgence with that. It is 6:15. I would like to ask the delegation from London Hydro to come forward. It is after 4:25. You're in luck. And as we do, Mr. Sharma, I will give you what I've given the others with your indulgence, and that is 5 minutes. That's always fun, but it is 5 minutes, and I'm relatively firm on that. Mr. Valenti will know that when I say it, I mean it, but I really do appreciate it. And there may well be some things, if you don't finish in the 5 minutes, may come up in Q&A, so when you're ready to go, so are we. So thank you, Mr. Valenti, Chairman, Mr. Sharma, CEO of London Hydro. Are you ready to go? Let's do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. City Councilor, City Staff, Gabe Valente, Chair of the Board of London Hydro. So it's my pleasure tonight to present a very brief overview of 2018 performance. You have the slide deck, you have the annual report, so clearly you've reviewed that. Simply put, 2018 was another great year for London Hydro, and certainly by extension for the City of London. Our continued positive performance is evidence of the hard work of our dedicated London Hydro employees, our senior management, and to a small part, the Board of Directors. We have the board here. I'd like to acknowledge them. If they can stand quickly, Connie Graham, our Vice Chair, Dr. Mohan Mather, Marilyn Sinclair is absent, Jack Smith, Guy Holborn, and our City Representative, Michael Van Holst. We also have our senior management team, Dr. Vinay Sharma, CEO, Bill Milroy, our VP Engineering Operations, Dave Arnold, our CFO, Syed Mir, CIO and VP Corporate Service, and Elizabeth Carswell, our Senior Director of Human Resources. At this time, I'd like to have Dr. Mather stand for a moment. All of you know Mohan. He's been a London Hydro board member for 13 years, last 5 years as chair. He's stepping down from the board. Under his dedicated leadership, London Hydro has increasingly become a digital technology leader, embracing innovation, reinvesting in critical infrastructure, while ensuring both prudent cost control and enhancing customer service levels. As an engineer and former dean of the University of Western University's Faculty of Engineering, he's been a very strong community leader, championing many innovative programs, not only for London Hydro, but for the university, but also for the City of London. So on a personal note, Mohan's been an inspirational leader of the board and has driven the board to excellence. So we'd like to thank him publicly for his years of service, and we wish you well. On behalf of the board, as well, I'd like to, do we have the next slide? Or?
I have no idea where to
Okay, we don't have a slide deck? Okay, so you have the slide deck. So as mentioned earlier, we had a very successful year at London Hydro. I'll just give you a couple of points. Our continued focus on reinvestment and maintenance of our critical infrastructure and technology footprint has increased our capital asset base by 10%. These prudent investments continue to ensure ongoing safety, reliability, and efficiency at London Hydro, culminating in a 2018 return on equity of about 8%. Our balance sheet remains very strong. We continue to enjoy an A-stable S&P credit rating. And at the end, in the end, our ongoing positive performance has allowed London Hydro to continue to deliver on our shareholder objectives. They're above a couple of examples of those objectives. For the first one, really our goal is to ensure strong growth in shareholder value. And by doing so, in 2018, we achieved shareholder equity growth of 6%. We continue to maintain our promised $5 million dividend to the city. The second part, which is equally important, is caring for our customers. It's critical to us. You'll see further in the presentation that we operate a highly efficient utility with distribution rates among the best in the province. We do so while we continue to achieve and enhance excellent service levels to our customers. So the last one, industry leadership, clearly, we've proven that year over year. Again, in 2018, we were recognized nationally and internationally for numerous industry innovations and technologies, which is really a testament to our London Hydro's employees' commitment to excellence and dedication. I'll pass it over to Vinay Sharma.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's 5 minutes, so I'm going to go off script, if you don't mind.
You have 1 minute, yes, thank you.
It's 1 minute, so we'll stay with 1 minute. So I really have, I'll go to the slide that I want to talk about. I always bring gifts, so here I am with a gift. London Hydro's technology leader, as our chair said, and this last year we did innovative customer service technology for water, and My Water is our application, smart app, and it was internationally recognized in Phoenix, Arizona, and from City Daniel Shaw, City Water Demand Manager, he came along with us, and we got 2 trophies. It says London Hydro, but really City was our partner. So if I can ask our chair to present this to Mayor, that'll be wonderful, Mr. Chair. In continuous development of our culture.
20 seconds, sir, I'm sorry.
Yeah, 20 seconds, sir. That's all I got. I don't know what happened to my slide, but I'll go here. There you go. So our culture development, we want our employees to belong to entire London Hydro and know everything about it. So we developed a coffee table book that is being distributed to you, which talks about our infrastructure. When you drive by the city, if you see something and you don't know what that is, look it up in the photograph. It's a very simple English translation of that infrastructure.
Thanks very much, Mr. Sharma. I know that there will be Q&A that comes as a result of that, and of all people, I would not want to cut you off, but I just have. So acknowledging that and thanking you both for your presentation and acknowledging the retiring chair who has given good and faithful service. Thank you, sir, for your time on behalf of the London Hydro and our city. That's very thoughtfully acknowledged by all of us. So what I will do is you receive these really nice glossy books. I don't know if the city manager gets one, but he likes that kind of thing. Does he? Good. Then what I will do is I will invite questions from colleagues with respect to our delegation. Was that did you have a question, Councillor Van Holst? You were just waving to family. Okay. Questions, Councillor Lehman, please. And we invite Mr. Valenti to come forward too, as questions for the two of you, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. We are fortunate in this city to have a utility such as London Hydro. I look at this with 2 hats. One as a shareholder and one as a city government elected official. As a shareholder, you have been able to produce excellent returns. And from what I've learned is for a utility, you have a unique sense of entrepreneurship that I think is unique among utilities in North America. What you are seeking to do through innovative thinking gives me confidence that you will continue to achieve the returns for shareholders, such as the City of London, going forward. As a city government official, I look for stability and low cost. When we are looking to attract business and industry, energy and sustainability in that energy, confidence and continued delivery of that energy is foremost in companies seeking, especially industrial, seeking to locate to this city. What I'd like to ask of you, if you could highlight one thing in both those areas, one entrepreneurship task that you are looking at that we could look forward to seeing dividends in the future, and what are you doing to maintain the stability of the energy source, especially as we go forward. We're going to be seeing, that's in the case of cars, the demands of energy and electricity is going to increase dramatically in the years and decades to come. So if you could address both those, please.
To the delegation, please.
Thank you, Councillor Lehman. And so there are two main aspects of our business. One is our infrastructure, but to operate that infrastructure, we need more technology. So what we are doing in order to remain sustainable, viable, and successful company in the future is investing in technology, which gives us efficiency in our operation, but then also in turn, we are seeking to share that technology with other utilities. So I didn't show that slide, but in one of the slides, as you have it with you, we show you these companies that are now our customers. So you are our customers, but we have now outside City of London customers that are bringing more revenue for us. And that is the sort of key distinction or unique differentiation that we are trying to achieve by becoming more digital. So that will assure your corporation, beyond even my tenure, successful and viability in the long run. Second, you mentioned about the energy supply. Yes, electricity is going to be the fuel of choice more and more in the future. So what we are doing is building the infrastructure to ensure a high reliable infrastructure in the city. Second, we have enough transmission system coming into City of London to ensure a long-term supply for the City of London. Third, infrastructure-wise, we are encouraging more local generation with our customers' partnership. We ourselves had invested into 10 such projects, but also our customers that we are encouraging and facilitating their local generation so that we can sustain in the long term. And all those factors then add in low cost and low price for our services to our customers. So that is our winning strategy.
Maybe I can just add to that. Councillor Lehman. So I think if one of the questions was how can London Hydro help the city attract new business or mitigate the cost to our consumers so that we can manage those costs? First of all, we're in a regulated environment. So, you know, we only can control a small part of our hydro bill. But that being said, all of these investments in technology are what we're aspiring to do is to try to mitigate the uncontrollable portion, which is the energy cost that we have. So we've been working in partnership not only with the entities that you see up on your screen, but with other community players as part of trying to be a component of the economic engine in London, partnering with new businesses, working with LEDC on various opportunities to help attract new business as well as maintain our cost structure. We're pretty much in the lowest quartile in the province as cost per customer, and that is one of our priorities, is maintaining low cost per customer. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments or questions for our delegation? Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, I wanted to just take this opportunity to thank thank all of the staff at London Hydro, and to encourage my colleagues, frankly, who haven't taken the opportunity to go on a tour and learn in person to do so. I found it very interesting, educational, and frankly, it was one of the reasons I felt comfortable popping out to talk to the housing folks while you started your presentation, because it was really enlightening to visit. And so I encourage colleagues, if you haven't done so, to take that opportunity. And yes, the enlightening was a deliberate play on words.
It was either that or electrifying. I wasn't sure which. Sorry, I will apologize in advance. Any other questions for our delegation? Councillor Van Meerbergen.
Thank you for the presentation. It's always good to see you guys. But as you've already stated, so much of this is provincially driven, right? And so here we are with a government that's a provincial government that's been in power about a year now. I'm interested in your take on what the landscape is like currently, how it maybe has changed, if at all, and do you see opportunities with this current government in the future?
To the delegation, please.
Thank you, Councillor Meerbergen. Yes, landscape has changed significantly. So today we have a subsidy for electricity by the provincial government called Fair Hydro Plan. It's not that costs are avoided, it's rather they have flexibility to fund that subsidy either through the tax base, the provincial tax base, or in the future through hydro rates again. That is their authority and their right, and they have passed a legislation to have that right with them. How will they do it is immaterial. All I can say is this has helped the consumers of electricity across Ontario to save their hydro bill, on their hydro bill. So going forward, past pains are behind us. We have paved the way for removal of coal-fired generation in the province. It was painful exercise, but we have gone through it. Going forward, I think this sector now represents lots of opportunity. So you mentioned province of Ontario controls much of energy supply, and our chair mentioned the same. That is true. However, that will not be true, sorry, I should say might not be true in 10 years. Because eventually government will also walk away from this risk, and they want this risk of energy procurement to be with the market. And our provincial entity, Independent Electricity System Operator, is working on a plan to renew the market, okay? And, but I suspect it'll take a few years before we get there. But that is the goal of the future, that market to work efficiently so that buyers and consumers can efficiently achieve the optimal price for that energy.
Thank you. Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, I'll ask one question. Just perhaps describe some of the people we've been able to assist outside of London. I know that we have very excellent infrastructure here. It's very rare that someone would come to London to help, but we've gone to many places to help when in terms of storms and disasters and things like that.
As we ask the delegation to respond, I've never seen Councillor Van Holst so excited to ask a question. There we go. To the delegation, please.
Thank you, Councillor Van Holst, our board member. Yes, indeed. So, storms come through many places, and last year also we had lots of storms. So our folks go outside to help. So there we made a trip to States as well. Our crew, 2 crews went over to help other hydros. Then we had all around London a large outage because of storm, mostly for Hydro One. And we had sent 11 people to restore the infrastructure in the vicinity of London. Now, London also gets storm, do not get me wrong, but with the kind indulgence of our board members and their guidance, we have been investing significant dollars in our infrastructure. It has strengthened, and also we have automated much of the infrastructure. For example, downtown, even though we have outages now and then, but it's all automated. So if that outage is momentary, we restore through switches and automatic controls from the control center, and then we send the crew later on to repair the malfunctioning part of the network. So that has helped us restore much more quickly. But the rural infrastructure requires very manual intensive restoration. And we have assisted, I think, 4 times in last year by sending crews to other utilities to assist.
Thank you. Is there a follow-up, Councillor Van Holst?
Thank you. I did have a comment just regarding Councillor Lehman's excellent question about what Ontario is doing for our city. In terms of, the question was attracting investment, and it's not just because we have very reliable energy source, but because we're so advanced technologically, and you can see the partners we have, we're actually attracting people to London to set up shop, to work with us. So it's actually creating jobs working with London Hydro, and there may be an announcement in the future. It's not something to say today, but so this is another advantage of having such a leading edge utility.
Well, I didn't hear a question or comment, but a great big compliment, so I think that's appropriate. Any other comments or questions from colleagues? Mr. Sharma, thank you. Mr. Valenti, thank you. And to your colleagues who were here today in support, always strength in numbers, but we appreciate you being here very much. Colleagues, I'm going to turn your attention to on 3.3, we've got several items, which includes a recommendation from London Hydro with respect to board and consideration of appointments. At your pleasure, we can deal with those appointments at another time. The other option is there's been a recommendation to support the obvious, which is continuing terms. And 2 names have been recommended who currently sit on the board to be reappointed. We can go a couple of different ways with this, but I would think that we probably want to deal with that portion separately so that we don't have the confusion that we might have had in the last vote. But I'd like to get some direction or thought. Councillor Van Holst, do you want to help us here?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm happy to move A through D, and then for receipt of those items, and then I have a motion for E that we could deal with separately.
Thank you. We have a motion A through D. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Pelosa, any comments or questions? Seeing none and seeking wisdom, I'll turn your attention to the screen, please.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed, 14-0.
Thanks very much. Colleagues, you'll see item E, which has, I believe, 14 individuals for consideration of appointments. I believe, Councillor Van Holst, you had a motion you'd like to put forward?
Yes, Your Worship, and I believe I have a seconder in Councillor Hillier. In the motion, I'm looking for A, that for the purpose of retaining a strong engineering skill set on the board of London Hydro, the following candidates be interviewed for the Class 3 Director position that's been vacated by the retirement of Mr. Mather. So that's, Abu Shark, Andrew Rymack, Sarah Shortreed, and John Tapix. Those are the individuals with that particular skill set, which we're losing, and we want to make sure that we have strong on the board, because this really is a company about engineering. And then B, that the Class 1 directors, Gabe Valente and Jack Smith, whose terms are up for renewal, be reappointed to the Board of London Hydro. And C, that the remaining Class 2, 3, and 4 directors whose terms are not up for removal be reappointed to the board.
Seconder, Councillor Hillier, comments, questions? So what we are suggesting is that the council, always seems a little odd to me that those individuals whose terms are not up, we're voting on that again, but that's the confirmation of continuing terms. That's part of your motion. The second part is that you put 2 names forward who are currently on the board, and you've acknowledged that, but that you're suggesting that interviews be taken for the final position. Yeah. So that is the duly moved and seconded motion. Any comments, questions? Councillor Kayabага.
Thank you, Chair. I think that we had voted to be able to open this to the public, and if we're going to do interviews, why don't we just interview everyone in that case?
I know that's exactly correct, and it's not uncommon. I am advised that we as council can choose to shortlist for the interviews as we choose. So that's certainly, if this motion passes, that's what we'd be doing. So we'd be taking, I'm going to speculate here if my math is correct, about 4 of a dozen or 4 of 10 or 12 individuals, and that's the motion duly seconded was that, those interviews are regarding one specific final appointment left. And, but it's the will of council at their pleasure, but it's a three-part motion that's been put forward. Any other, so just so you're clear, and I'm clear that that's the intent, is that we do the interviews, but we'd be, if this motion passes, we'd be doing the interviews for one position. I believe I have that right, Councillor? Any other comments or questions about that? Then let's turn our attention to the screen as we vote, please. So we need to get a straw vote tonight.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 13-1.
So the only other issue then is, as we did with boards and commissions appointments before, we struck a committee. I believe we did that through corporate services. So we would need a motion to do the same again, so that we've got a process by which to keep that organized. And is there a mover for that? Councillor Van Holst, seconded by Councillor Hillier. Any comments or questions? Councillor Van Holst.
So I'll make a comment. We had, and I want to thank all the people that applied to be on the board. There's some excellent candidates here outside the engineering skill set. However, at some time in the future, London Hydro may be coming to you to look for the opportunity to set up an affiliate so that we could take some.
So noted, but I think we're going to go down a road that I don't think we want to go down as yet, but just to say that we do appreciate the others putting their names forward.
Okay.
I'm not trying to cut you off, but I think we're going to go down a road that probably it isn't appropriate at this moment.
Okay.
So may I say thank you for that? And I
Thank
think
you.
it's a thoughtful comment, please. Any other comments or questions? Turn your attention to the screen as we vote. Thanks.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 14-0.
Thanks very much again. I'd like to thank our guests from London Hydro for that. Colleagues, we have a few items left, a report from the governance working group, and one other matter, and then confidential session, but I'm always acknowledging the time. There is a hot meal for councillors upstairs or down here. We're not taking the elevator. That's the good news. And I wonder this, it's 6:45, or 7:45. When should we? Is that 7? Thank you. It's a challenge. 6:45, when should we reconvene back for meetings? What's your pleasure? It doesn't need an hour. Councillor Sally, you had a thought?
I was fine with us just working through it. Just it doesn't seem like we have too much left.
I always leave it to the will of council's stomachs as to what to determine in this regard. Councillor Lewis, then Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Every time we say that we have only a few items left, we end up sitting here for another 45 minutes to an hour, so I would respectfully ask that we stick to our scheduled break.
Do you agree, Councillor Cassidy? Option B, what is that?
Option B
We're
is,
just
we're
chatting.
receiving a report, we're receiving Councillor Lewis's resignation. I think we can get through those, and we'll be in camera. We can bring our food in camera and eat in there.
You are wise. Oh, my goodness. Is that the pleasure of council to do it that way? I'm getting a lot of nods. Certainly a better idea than Councillor Lewis's, which I really like, you know, so. So with all of that, colleagues, let's turn your attention to the third report of the governance working group. That's to be received. Motion to receive. Councillor Pelosi. Seconded by Councillor Lewis. I had to, comments, questions. Seeing none, turn your attention to the screen as we vote.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 14-0.
Colleagues, we have a resignation from Councillor Lewis from the Middlesex London Food Policy Council. A motion to accept Councillor Sally, seconded by Deputy Mayor Helmer. Any comments, questions? Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm sorry to disappoint Councillor Squire that it's only a resignation from the Food Policy Council and not from council, but I do want to say, for those who may be tuned in from the Food Policy Council, I appreciate the opportunity to work with them. Since I stepped in to fill that gap, I've also taken on the library board, which is a really important and dear to my heart task, and there have been changes at home, as not to mention the pending relocation to a new home right in the heart of wonderful Ward 2. And the workload is just a little heavier than I can manage at the moment, so I think that this deserves somebody who can devote the attention that's required to it. So I want to make that opportunity available to a colleague.
Well, thank you for your attention, and should a colleague be interested in assuming this role, could I ask you to bring it forward to us, and we'll put that forward at the next appropriate meeting. Councillor Kayabaka? Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought you were jumping in for a moment there. All right, noting that, let's turn your attention to the screen as we vote.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 14-0.
For the record, I'm pleased that Councillor Lewis is going to stay on other things. I'm not aware of any deferred matters or additional business, colleagues. I'll look for a motion to move into confidential session, from which we will then report out to the public after. Councillor Pelosi, seconded by Councillor Kayabaka. Thank you. Oh, we're going to go to the screen.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 14-0.
So colleagues, let's pick up a plate as per Councillor Cassidy's thought, and we'll go into, with those, to Committee Room 3, and then we'll adjourn public after that meeting. Thank you very much.